A billionaire CEO stands crying at a single father's door on Christmas Eve, not because she lost everything, but because she finally found something real. This is the story of Ryan Carter, a man who barely survived each day, and Isabella Vaughn, a woman who had everything except what mattered. One small act of kindness, one broken engagement, one impossible choice that would cost her the life she built and give her the life she needed. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The house was cold. Not the kind of cold that comes from winter pressing against thin walls, though there was plenty of that. This was the cold of emptiness, of a radiator that clicked and groaned but never quite warmed the rooms, of a father who came home too tired to notice the frost forming on the inside of the kitchen window. Ryan Carter stood in the narrow hallway of his rental house, one hand still on his son's bedroom doorknob, listening to the silence. 6-year-old Ethan had finally fallen asleep after an hour of questions Ryan didn't have good answers to. "Dad, why don't we have a Christmas tree yet?" "We will, buddy, soon." "Dad, can we get the kind with lights?" "We'll see." "Dad, is Santa coming this year?" That one had stuck in Ryan's throat. He'd managed something vague about Santa being really busy, then distracted Ethan with a story about a brave knight who didn't need a castle to be strong. The boy had drifted off somewhere around the part where the knight saved the village with nothing but his courage and a rusty sword. Ryan wished real life worked that way. He walked down the hallway, his footsteps barely making a sound on the worn carpet. The living room was small and cluttered with evidence of their life. Ethan's drawings taped to the walls, a basket of unfolded laundry Ryan kept meaning to get to. The TV they only turned on for cartoons on Saturday mornings because the cable had been cut 6 months ago. The couch sagged in the middle. The coffee table had 3 legs and a stack of books propping up the 4th corner. The walls were beige, not by choice, but by landlord decree, and the paint was peeling near the ceiling where water damage from the upstairs apartment had bled through. Ryan dropped onto the couch and let his head fall back. His body ached in that deep, specific way that came from 12-hour shifts loading freight at the distribution center. His hands were raw despite the gloves he wore. His right shoulder had been screaming at him for the past week, but he couldn't afford to see a doctor, and he definitely couldn't afford to miss work. The bills were spread across the coffee table like a losing hand of cards. Electric, water, overdue notice from the landlord, medical bills from Ethan's ear infection last month, grocery receipt from yesterday, $47.82 for a week's worth of the cheapest everything. Ryan picked up the electric bill, past due. They'd already sent one warning. He had 4 days to come up with $183 or they'd shut it off. He set it back down and closed his eyes. 3 years ago, his life had looked different. He'd had a wife. They'd had plans. Sarah had been 7 months pregnant, glowing and excited, painting the nursery in their small apartment pale yellow because they didn't want to know if it was a boy or a girl. They were young and broke and stupidly happy about it. Then Ethan came early. Complications. The hospital had done everything they could, but Sarah's body had just given out. Ryan had held his newborn son in one arm and signed his wife's death certificate with the other hand, and the world had split into before and after. He didn't let himself think about the before very often. It hurt too much. And hurt was a luxury he couldn't afford. He had a kid to raise. Alone. The after was all that mattered now. Ryan forced himself off the couch and walked to the kitchen. It was past midnight, but he wasn't tired. Or rather, he was so tired that tired didn't mean anything anymore. He opened the fridge. 1/2 gallon of milk. Some cheese slices. Leftovers from 2 nights ago that Ethan had refused to eat. A 6-pack of beer he'd bought 4 months ago and still hadn't touched because drinking alone felt too much like giving up. He grabbed a glass of water instead and leaned against the counter, staring at nothing. The knock came so suddenly that he flinched, sloshing water onto his shirt. For a second he just stood there, confused. Nobody came to his house. He didn't have friends. Not anymore. The people he worked with were friendly enough, but they had their own lives, their own problems. His family lived 3 states away and had made it clear that helping him raise Ethan wasn't something they were interested in doing. His in-laws had vanished after the funeral. The knock came again, louder this time, more urgent. Ryan set down the glass and walked to the front door, his mind already running through possibilities. Landlord? No, Mr. Hewitt didn't make house calls, especially not at this hour. Neighbor? Maybe, but the guy upstairs barely spoke English and the couple next door kept to themselves. Police? That thought made his stomach drop. Had something happened? Was Ethan okay? No, Ethan was asleep in his room, safe. But what if... He opened the door and froze. Isabella Vaughn stood on his front porch. For a moment, Ryan's brain simply refused to process what he was seeing. It was like finding a movie star in your driveway or a president at your mailbox, so completely out of context that reality itself seemed to glitch. Isabella Vaughn, CEO of Meridian Logistics. The woman whose face was on the company website, in the break room poster about workplace excellence, in the occasional email blast about quarterly earnings. The woman who made more in a day than Ryan would make in his entire life. She was standing on his porch, in the cold, crying. Her voice cracked. She tried again. I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't be here. Ryan just stared. He'd seen her before, of course. Everyone at Meridian had seen her. She did quarterly walkthroughs of the distribution center, always in a sharp suit and heels that clicked against the concrete floor, always surrounded by assistants with clipboards and executives trying to look important. She was beautiful in that untouchable way powerful women often were, perfectly styled dark hair, designer clothes, the kind of confidence that came from never having to wonder if you belonged in a room. But the woman on his porch looked nothing like that. Her hair was loose and messy, falling around her face in dark waves. She wasn't wearing a suit, just jeans and a sweater that looked expensive but not warm enough for the December cold. Her eyes were red and swollen, mascara smudged beneath them. She was shaking, and Ryan couldn't tell if it was from the cold or something else. Ms. Vaughn? He finally managed. She flinched at the name like it hurt. Isabella, please. What are you doing here? The question came out harsher than he meant it to. He was tired and confused, and this was too strange to process. I don't know. She laughed, but it sounded broken. I was driving, and I ended up here. I'm sorry, this is insane. I'll go. She turned to leave, but something in the way she moved, shoulders hunched, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold something in, made Ryan step forward. Wait. She stopped, but didn't turn around. Ryan looked past her at the driveway. There was a car parked there, some sleek luxury thing that probably cost more than this house. The engine was still running, exhaust curling into the frozen air. He should let her go. This was bizarre, inappropriate. He had work in 6 hours and a kid asleep down the hall and a life that was already complicated enough without whatever this was. But she was crying. And Ryan had never been good at walking away from people who were hurting. Do you want to come inside? He asked quietly. Isabella turned slowly. Her eyes met his, and Ryan saw something there that caught him off guard. Not gratitude, but relief. Like she'd been hoping he'd ask, but hadn't believed he would. I shouldn't, she said. Probably not, Ryan agreed. But it's freezing out here, and you look like you could use a minute to sit down. She hesitated, glancing at her car, then back at him. I don't want to impose. You're not. That was a lie. She absolutely was. But Ryan stepped back and held the door open anyway, and after a long moment, Isabella walked inside. The house was smaller than she'd imagined. Isabella stood in the narrow entryway, suddenly hyper-aware of everything. The worn carpet, the peeling paint, the pile of shoes by the door that were all too small to be Ryan's. She could hear a radiator clanking somewhere, struggling against the cold. The air smelled like laundry detergent and something vaguely sweet, maybe cereal. Sorry about the mess, Ryan said, closing the door behind her. Isabella almost laughed. There was barely any mess, compared to her penthouse, which always looked immaculate because she paid people to keep it that way. This place was lived in. Real. It's fine, she said softly. Ryan gestured toward the living room. You can sit if you want. Can I get you something? Water? Coffee? I think I have tea somewhere. Water's fine. Thank you. She moved into the living room and sat carefully on the edge of the couch, her hands folded in her lap. Ryan disappeared into what she assumed was the kitchen. She heard the tap running, the clink of glass. While he was gone, Isabella looked around, really looked. The first thing she noticed were the drawings on the wall, dozens of them, taped up at different heights, done in crayon and marker. Stick figures holding hands. A house with a crooked door and windows that didn't quite line up. A superhero with a cape and a big smile. In the corner of each one, careful letters spelled out Ethan, Ryan's son. Isabella knew he had a kid. Everyone at Meridian knew. It was part of his reputation. The guy who always left exactly on time, who never stayed for overtime unless it was an emergency, who kept a photo of a little boy taped to his locker. Some people judged him for it. Isabella had heard the whispers. Not a team player. Doesn't go the extra mile. She'd never participated in those conversations, but she'd never stopped them either. Now looking at these drawings, she felt something twist uncomfortably in her chest. Ryan came back with 2 glasses of water and handed her one. He sat down on the opposite end of the couch, keeping distance between them. "Thank you," Isabella said quietly. "Yeah." Silence settled between them, awkward and heavy. Isabella sipped her water and tried to figure out what to say. What could she say? Sorry for showing up at your house in the middle of the night like a crazy person? Sorry for crying on your porch? Sorry for existing in your space when you clearly have enough to deal with? "I called off my wedding," she said instead. The words just came out. She hadn't planned to say them, hadn't planned to say anything, but suddenly they were there, hanging in the air between them. Ryan didn't react. He just took a drink of his water and waited. "It was supposed to be in 3 days," Isabella continued. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, flat, detached, like she was reading from a script. "Christmas Eve wedding. Very romantic, very expensive, very perfect. But you called it off," Ryan said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "Why?" Isabella looked down at the glass in her hands. The water trembled slightly. Her hands were still shaking. "Because I realized I don't love him. Not the way I should. Not the way—" She trailed off. "The way what?" Ryan asked. Isabella looked up at him. He was watching her with those quiet, steady eyes, and something about his expression made the words spill out before she could stop them. "Not the way you loved your wife." Ryan went very still. "I'm sorry," Isabella said quickly. "I shouldn't have. I don't know why I said that. I don't know anything about your wife. That was completely inappropriate." "How do you know about Sarah?" His voice was careful, controlled. I heard people talking, at work, about you." Isabella felt her face flush. "I'm sorry. That sounds like I was prying, but I wasn't. People just talk. And you're different from everyone else there." "Different how?" "You care." Ryan let out a short, humorless laugh. "That's a low bar." "You'd be surprised." Another silence. This one felt different, though, less awkward, more fragile, like they were both standing on ice that might crack at any moment. "I don't understand love," Isabella said quietly. "I thought I did. I thought love was partnership, mutual respect, shared goals. My fiancé, ex-fiancé, he checked all the boxes. Successful, smart, ambitious. We looked good together. Everyone said so." "But," Ryan prompted. "But it felt empty." Isabella's voice cracked. "We've been together for 4 years, and I can't remember the last time he asked me how I was doing and actually wanted to know the answer. We have conversations about market trends and real estate investments and which charity gala we should attend, but we don't talk. We don't laugh. We don't—" She stopped, pressing her hand to her mouth. Ryan waited. "I watched you," Isabella said finally, "at work. A few weeks ago you helped me with my car." "The battery," Ryan said, recognition dawning. "In the parking lot." "Yes. Everyone else just walked past. They saw me standing there, saw the hood up, and they kept going. But you stopped. You were late getting off shift. I could see other people leaving, but you stayed and helped me anyway. You didn't have to." "It was just a jump start," Ryan said, uncomfortable. "It took 5 minutes. It wasn't just that." Isabella leaned forward slightly. "After that, I started noticing other things. The way you help people. That new guy, Marcus, who kept messing up the inventory codes, you spent your lunch break teaching him the system. Nobody asked you to. You just did it." Ryan shifted in his seat. "Marcus was stressed. He's got 3 kids. He needed this job." And Jessica in accounting, Isabella continued. She was having computer problems and IT was backed up. You fixed it for her. I used to do tech support, Ryan muttered. It wasn't a big deal. And you're always the first one to volunteer when someone needs shift coverage. You helped carry boxes for that older guy with the bad knee. You organize the Secret Santa every year. You remember people's birthdays. Okay, stop. Ryan set down his water glass with more force than necessary. I'm not some kind of saint. I'm just trying to get through the day like everyone else. No, Isabella said firmly. You're not. Everyone else is trying to get through the day by looking out for themselves. You're trying to get through the day by looking out for everyone else. There's a difference. Ryan stood up abruptly and walked to the window. He stood there with his back to her, arms crossed, shoulders tense. You don't know me, he said quietly. I know enough. You don't. He turned to face her. You don't know that I lie to my kid about whether we can afford Christmas presents. You don't know that I'm 3 weeks away from getting evicted. You don't know that half the time I help people at work, it's because I'm trying not to think about my own problems. You see some guy being nice, and you've built this whole story in your head about who I am, but you're wrong. Am I? Isabella stood too, facing him across the small room. 3 weeks ago, I heard you on the phone during your break. You were talking to your son. You told him that Christmas didn't need to be big, that the important thing was being together. And the way you said it, it wasn't resignation. It was belief. You actually meant it. Ryan's jaw tightened. I realized that I have never in my entire life had a conversation like that with anyone, Isabella continued, her voice shaking now. I have never valued something just because it was real and honest and true. Everything in my life is about appearances, about winning, about being the best and having the most and never, ever showing weakness. And I'm about to marry a man who lives the same way. And we're going to build this perfect, empty life together. And I'm going to wake up in 20 years and realize I never felt anything real. So don't marry him, Ryan said. Problem solved. I already didn't. That's why I'm here. No. Ryan shook his head. You're here because you had a moment of panic and you needed somewhere to go. Tomorrow you'll wake up and realize this was a mistake. You'll go back to your penthouse and your perfect life and your rich friends, and this, he gestured around the shabby living room, will seem like some weird dream you had. Is that what you think of me? I don't know what to think of you, Ryan said honestly. You're standing in my living room in the middle of the night, crying about your broken engagement and telling me I'm some kind of good person when you barely know me. This whole thing is insane. I know. You should go home. I know that too. But neither of them moved. Isabella stood there hugging herself, looking lost in a way Ryan had never seen anyone in a position of power look lost. And Ryan stood by the window, exhausted and confused and struggling with the sudden, uncomfortable realization that despite everything, despite the absurdity of this situation, despite the gulf between their lives, he didn't actually want her to leave. Why did you really come here? He asked quietly. Isabella met his eyes. Because when I called off the wedding tonight, the first thing I felt was relief. And the second thing I felt was terror. Because I didn't know what to do next. I got in my car and just started driving, and I ended up here, at your house. The house of a man I barely know, whose only crime was being decent to me when he didn't have to be. She laughed shakily. You're right. It's insane. Yeah, Ryan agreed. It really is. I should go. Probably. Isabella walked toward the door. Ryan followed her. She had her hand on the doorknob when she stopped and turned back. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. Your wife. Sarah. Did you love her? The question landed like a punch to the sternum, but Ryan didn't flinch. He'd learned a long time ago that grief demanded honesty. Yes, he said simply. How did you know? Ryan thought about it. Because when I was with her, everything felt more real. Colors were brighter. Food tasted better. Even the hard stuff, the fights, the stress, the uncertainty, it all felt worth it because we were going through it together. And when she died, he stopped, swallowed hard. When she died, it was like someone turned down the volume on the whole world. Everything got quieter and grayer, and I haven't figured out how to turn it back up. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. I have never felt that way about anyone. Then don't marry someone you don't feel that way about. What if I never feel that way? What if I'm broken? You're not broken, Ryan said firmly. You're just scared. How do you know? Because broken people don't show up on strangers' doorsteps asking questions about love. Broken people stop asking questions at all. Isabella stared at him for a long moment. Then, without warning, she stepped forward and hugged him. Ryan froze. He wasn't sure what to do. His arms hung awkwardly at his sides while Isabella pressed her face against his shoulder and cried silently, her whole body shaking. Slowly, carefully, he brought his arms up and hugged her back. They stood like that for a while. Two people who barely knew each other, holding on like they were keeping each other from drowning. Ryan could feel her tears soaking through his shirt. He could hear her trying to breathe quietly so she wouldn't wake Ethan. He could smell her perfume, something expensive and floral that didn't belong in this house. And beneath all of that, he could feel something shifting, some invisible line being crossed. This was dangerous. He knew it was dangerous. This woman was his boss's boss's boss. She was engaged. No, not engaged anymore, but still. She lived in a different world. Whatever this was, it couldn't go anywhere. It couldn't mean anything. But right now, in this moment, it meant something. When Isabella finally pulled back, her eyes were red but clearer. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be. I've ruined your night. It wasn't that great to begin with." She laughed, a small, wet sound that was almost a sob. "I should really go now." "Okay." This time when she opened the door, she actually walked through it. The cold air rushed in, sharp and biting. Isabella wrapped her arms around herself and hurried down the porch steps toward her car. Ryan stood in the doorway, watching her go. She had her hand on the car door when she stopped and looked back at him one more time. "Thank you," she called out. "For what?" "For not making me feel crazy." "You are crazy," Ryan said. "But that's okay." Isabella smiled, a real smile this time, small but genuine. Then she got in her car and Ryan watched the taillights disappear down the street. He closed the door and leaned against it, suddenly aware of how fast his heart was beating. What the hell just happened? He walked back to the living room and sat down on the couch, staring at the spot where Isabella had been sitting. The glass of water she'd been holding was still on the coffee table, lipstick stain on the rim. Ryan picked it up and carried it to the kitchen. He washed it carefully, dried it, put it back in the cupboard. Like if he erased the physical evidence, he could pretend none of this had happened. But he couldn't pretend. Isabella Vaughn had been in his house. She'd cried on his shoulder. She'd asked him about love like he was some kind of expert, which was laughable considering his own life was held together with duct tape and stubbornness. He thought about her question. "How did you know you loved her?" The answer he'd given Isabella was true, but it wasn't complete. The truth was messier than that. The truth was that he'd known he loved Sarah because being with her had scared him. Not in a bad way, in the way that standing at the edge of something vast and unknown was scary, like looking over a cliff and realizing you wanted to jump. He'd felt a shadow of that fear tonight, standing in his living room with a woman he barely knew, and it terrified him, because Ryan Carter had already jumped once. He'd jumped and lost everything. He'd crashed so hard that he was still finding pieces of himself in the wreckage 3 years later. He couldn't do it again. He wouldn't survive it. Down the hall, Ethan called out in his sleep, some fragment of a dream. Ryan walked to his son's room and pushed open the door quietly. Ethan was sprawled across his twin bed, covers kicked off, one arm hanging off the side. His mouth was open slightly, his breathing deep and even. Ryan pulled the blanket back over him and tucked it around his small shoulders. Ethan stirred but didn't wake. "Love you, buddy," Ryan whispered. In the morning, this would all seem like a strange dream. Isabella would wake up in her own world and realize this had been a mistake. She'd probably be embarrassed. They'd see each other at work and pretend it never happened. That was fine. That was better, actually. Ryan went to his own room, barely bigger than a closet, with just enough space for a bed and a dresser. He lay down on top of the covers, still fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come. Instead, he thought about the way Isabella had looked standing on his porch. Lost and vulnerable and heartbreakingly human. He thought about the weight of her in his arms when she'd hugged him. He thought about the question in her eyes when she'd asked if she was broken, and he thought about his own answer. Broken people stop asking questions. Maybe that was true for her. But what about him? Ryan had stopped asking questions a long time ago. He'd stopped asking if things would get better, stopped asking if he deserved more, stopped asking if there was anything beyond the day-to-day grind of survival. He'd stopped asking because the answers hurt too much. But tonight, for just a moment, he'd felt something flicker back to life. Some small, stubborn spark that he thought had died with Sarah. It scared him. It scared him because he knew what happened when you let yourself hope. You got hurt. You got broken. You ended up alone in a cold house with bills you couldn't pay and a kid asking questions about Santa that you couldn't answer. Hope was dangerous. But as Ryan finally drifted off to sleep somewhere around 3 in the morning, he couldn't quite convince himself to let it go. The alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., drilling into Ryan's skull like it always did. He'd managed maybe 2 hours of actual sleep, the rest of the night spent in that twilight zone between conscious and unconscious, where his brain kept replaying the same scene over and over. Isabella on his porch, Isabella crying, Isabella asking him about love like he had any right to answer. He hit the snooze button harder than necessary and dragged himself out of bed. The house was still dark, still cold. Ryan pulled on his work clothes, jeans, thermal shirt, the heavy Meridian Logistics jacket with his name embroidered over the pocket. His reflection in the bathroom mirror looked like hell, dark circles under his eyes. 2 days of stubble he hadn't bothered to shave. Hair sticking up in 3 different directions. He splashed cold water on his face and told himself to get it together. Down the hall, Ethan's alarm clock started beeping, some obnoxious tune from a cartoon Ryan didn't know the name of. He heard his son groan dramatically, then the telltale thump of small feet hitting the floor. "Dad?" Ethan's voice was sleep-rough and cranky. "Yeah, buddy, I'm up. It's too early." "I know, but we talked about this, remember? You go to Mrs. Chen's before school now." Mrs. Chen was their downstairs neighbor, a 70-year-old widow who'd agreed to watch Ethan in the mornings for $40 a week, money Ryan could barely afford but had no choice about. His shift started at 6, and Ethan's school didn't open until 7:30. The math didn't work any other way. Ethan appeared in the bathroom doorway, still in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes. "I don't like going to Mrs. Chen's. She makes me eat oatmeal." "Oatmeal's good for you. It tastes like glue." "When have you eaten glue?" Tommy ate glue once at school. He said it tasted bad. Oatmeal tastes the same. Ryan couldn't argue with that logic, mostly because he was too tired. "Go get dressed. Something warm. It's cold out." Ethan shuffled away, muttering about oatmeal and the unfairness of early mornings. Ryan finished getting ready, then went to the kitchen to pack Ethan's lunch. Peanut butter sandwich, apple slices, crackers, a juice box from the discount pack at the grocery store. He stared at the contents of the lunchbox and felt the familiar weight of inadequacy settle on his shoulders. Other kids probably had better lunches. Lunchables and chips and cookies, things that came in packages with cartoon characters on them, things that cost money. Ethan came back wearing mismatched socks and his favorite superhero shirt, the one with a small hole near the collar that Ryan kept meaning to sew. "I'm ready." "You need a jacket." "I'm not cold." "Ethan." "Fine." The kid grabbed his coat from the hook by the door with the maximum amount of drama a 6-year-old could muster. They walked down the interior stairs to Mrs. Chen's apartment. Ryan knocked, and the door opened almost immediately. Mrs. Chen stood there in a floral bathrobe, her gray hair in curlers, smiling at Ethan like he was the best thing she'd seen all week. "There's my boy," she said warmly. Come in, come in. I made oatmeal." Ethan shot Ryan a look that clearly said, "I told you so." "Thank you, Mrs. Chen," Ryan said. "I'll pick him up around 4. No rush. We'll be fine. Won't we, Ethan?" Ethan nodded reluctantly and shuffled inside. Ryan watched him go, feeling that same pang he felt every morning, part guilt, part relief, part fear that he was screwing this up in ways he wouldn't understand until Ethan was grown and in therapy. "Mr. Carter?" Mrs. Chen's voice pulled him back. "Yeah?" She lowered her voice, glancing back to make sure Ethan was out of earshot. "The rent notice. On your door. I saw it yesterday." Ryan's stomach dropped. "I'm handling it." "I wasn't asking. I just wanted to say, if you need a little more time with my payment this month, that's okay. You've always been good to me. I can wait." The kindness hit him harder than it should have. "No, I'll have it. Friday, like always." "The offer stands," she said gently, then smiled and closed the door. Ryan stood there for a second, staring at the peeling paint on her doorframe, trying to swallow down the lump in his throat. Then he turned and headed out to his truck. The drive to Meridian took 20 minutes. The distribution center sat on the edge of town, a massive concrete structure surrounded by 18-wheelers and forklifts and the constant hum of industrial work. Ryan pulled into the employee lot just as the sky was starting to lighten. Not sunrise yet, but that pale gray that came before it. He clocked in at 5:58 a.m. The break room was already half full. Third shift was wrapping up, first shift trickling in. The coffee machine was making that gurgling sound it always made, producing something that barely qualified as coffee but had enough caffeine to matter. "Carter, you look like death," Marcus said, walking past with his own cup of the terrible coffee. "Didn't sleep much. Kid keep you up?" "Something like that," Marcus grinned. "Mine had me up till midnight. 4-year-old decided she's afraid of the closet now. Had to sit there and prove there were no monsters. For an hour." Ryan managed a tired smile. "Yeah, that sounds about right. You doing okay, man? You seem off." "Just tired," Ryan said, pouring himself coffee he didn't want but needed anyway. The truth was too complicated to explain. "How did you tell someone that your boss's boss's boss had shown up at your house last night crying about her broken engagement? That she'd hugged you and asked you about love and left you feeling like the ground had shifted under your feet? You didn't. You kept your mouth shut and did your job and pretended everything was normal. The shift started the way it always did. Loading trucks, moving pallets, scanning inventory codes. Repetitive, physical, mind-numbing work that Ryan had gotten good at over the past 3 years. He could do it on autopilot now, which was useful on days when his brain was too fried to think. Around 8, his supervisor, Dale, stopped by with a clipboard. "Carter, need you on receiving today. We've got 3 trucks coming in back-to-back and Henderson called in sick." "Sure. No problem." Dale looked at him more closely. "You good? You look rough." "I'm fine." "If you need to take a sick day." "I'm fine," Ryan repeated, more firmly this time. Dale shrugged and walked away. Ryan knew what he'd been implying. The company offered sick days, technically, but they were unpaid and frowned upon unless you were literally hospitalized. Taking one meant falling behind on bills Ryan was already behind on. So he worked. He unloaded boxes. He signed shipment forms. He helped the new guy, Travis, figure out the forklift controls when Travis almost drove it into a support beam. He ate lunch alone in his truck, the sandwich he'd made for himself that morning, identical to Ethan's, and tried not to think about anything at all. It almost worked. Then, at 2:15 p.m., Jessica from accounting appeared in the warehouse. Jessica never came to the warehouse. Accounting was in the office building on the other side of the complex, temperature-controlled and carpeted and completely separate from the concrete and machinery of the distribution floor. The fact that she was here, picking her way carefully between pallets in her heels and slacks, meant something unusual was happening. She spotted Ryan and made her way over. "Hey, you got a minute?" "Yeah, what's up?" Jessica glanced around, then lowered her voice. "Have you heard about Ms. Vaughn?" Ryan's heart rate kicked up. He kept his expression neutral. "Heard what?" "She called off her wedding, like completely canceled it. It was supposed to be this weekend." Ryan already knew this, obviously, but he couldn't say that. "Seriously?" "Yeah, apparently it happened last night. Super sudden. The whole executive floor is freaking out. Her assistant has been crying in the bathroom. There are like a million vendors trying to figure out what to do." "That's... wow," Ryan said, which felt inadequate but was all he could manage. "I know, right? I mean, I didn't even know she was engaged, but apparently it was this whole big society thing. Her fiancé is some hedge fund guy. It's going to be all over the news." "Why are you telling me this?" Ryan asked carefully. Jessica blinked. "I don't know. You're always good with people's stuff. I guess I thought... I don't know what I thought. It's just crazy, right? I wonder what happened." "Maybe she realized she didn't want to get married," Ryan said quietly. "Must be more than that. You don't call off a wedding 3 days before unless something major happened." Ryan thought about Isabella standing on his porch, her eyes red and her voice breaking. "I don't understand love the way you do." "People change their minds," he said. "It happens." Jessica studied him for a moment, like she was trying to figure something out. Then she shrugged. "I guess. Anyway, I should get back. I just thought you'd want to know. Thanks. She walked away and Ryan stood there holding a clipboard, trying to process. So it was real. Isabella had actually gone through with it. She'd canceled the wedding, blown up her life. Because of what? Conversation with him? That didn't make sense. He was nobody, just some guy who'd helped her jumpstart her car. Except he knew it wasn't that simple. Something had shifted in Isabella before she ever showed up at his door. He'd just been the person she'd landed on when she finally couldn't hold it together anymore. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. Ryan worked mechanically, his mind somewhere else. When 4 o'clock finally came, he clocked out and drove straight to Ethan's school. The pickup line was long, parents in SUVs and minivans waiting for their kids. Ryan's truck looked out of place, old, dented, barely passing inspection. He pulled up to the curb and waited. Ethan came running out with his backpack bouncing, his face lit up the way it always was right after school, before homework and dinner and bedtime routines sucked the joy out of him. "Dad!" He climbed into the truck, bringing a blast of cold air with him. "Guess what?" "What?" "We made snowflakes today. Out of paper. Mine was the best one." "That's great, buddy. Can we hang it on the fridge?" "Absolutely." Ethan chattered the whole drive home about his day, about the snowflakes, about how Tommy got in trouble for throwing pencils, about how the cafeteria had pizza, but it wasn't very good pizza. Ryan listened with half his attention, making the right noises at the right times. When they got home, Ethan ran inside ahead of him, already pulling the paper snowflake out of his backpack. Ryan followed more slowly, unlocking the door and stepping into the cold, quiet house. He stuck Ethan's snowflake on the fridge with a magnet, right next to a drawing of a dinosaur and a spelling test with a gold star on it. "Can we watch cartoons?" Ethan asked hopefully. "No TV until homework's done." "I don't have homework." "Really?" "Well, maybe a little. Go do the little homework, then cartoons." Ethan groaned but trudged off to the kitchen table with his backpack. Ryan started pulling together dinner, spaghetti, because it was cheap and Ethan would actually eat it. He boiled water, browned some ground beef, dumped in a jar of sauce. His phone buzzed. Ryan wiped his hands on a towel and checked it. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him swipe to accept. "Hello?" "Ryan, it's Isabella." His heart stopped. Actually stopped for a second, then kicked back into overdrive. "Ms. Vaughn," he said, his voice coming out too formal. "Isabella?" she corrected softly. "Is this a bad time?" Ryan glanced at Ethan, who was hunched over his homework, tongue sticking out in concentration. No, it's okay. Just making dinner." "I won't keep you. I just wanted to apologize for last night. Showing up like that was completely inappropriate." "You don't need to apologize. I do. You were kind to me when you didn't have to be, and I put you in an incredibly awkward position." Ryan turned away from Ethan, lowering his voice. "Did you really call it off? The wedding?" A long pause. "Yes. Are you okay?" "I don't know," Isabella admitted. "I don't think I've ever made a decision this big without knowing exactly what would happen next. It's terrifying." "Yeah, I bet. But it was the right thing to do. I'm sure of that much." Ryan didn't know what to say to that. The water on the stove started boiling over, hissing onto the burner. He turned the heat down. "I also wanted to thank you," Isabella continued, "for listening, for being honest with me. It helped more than you know." "I didn't do anything." "You did, and I—" She stopped. "I should let you go. I'm sure you're busy." "Isabella." "Yes?" "If you need someone to talk to, like in the future, you can call." Another pause, longer this time. "Thank you. That means a lot." She hung up. Ryan stood there holding his phone, staring at the boiling pot of pasta, trying to figure out what the hell he'd just done. "Dad?" Ethan's voice from behind him. "The water's bubbling over again." Ryan turned the heat down more and dumped the spaghetti in. His hands were shaking slightly. This was stupid. This was incredibly stupid. Isabella Vaughn was not his friend. She was his boss's boss's boss, and she was going through something intense and complicated, and he needed to stay out of it. But even as he thought it, he knew he wouldn't. The next few days fell into an uneasy rhythm. Ryan worked his shifts, picked up Ethan, made dinner, helped with homework, tucked his kid into bed. Everything normal. everything routine. Except Isabella called him every night. The first time, the night after their initial conversation, his phone rang at 9 p.m. After Ethan was asleep, after the dishes were done, after Ryan had finally sat down on the couch with a beer he still wouldn't drink. "I hope I'm not bothering you," she'd said. "You're not. I needed to hear a voice that wasn't trying to fix me or tell me what to do." So they talked. About nothing important. About how her day had been, full of lawyers and canceled vendors, and her mother screaming at her over the phone. About how his day had been, loading trucks and arguing with Ethan about bedtime. It should have been weird. It was weird. But it also felt strangely natural. The second night, she called at 8:45. They talked for an hour. The third night, 8:30. Ryan found himself waiting for it, listening for his phone. The fourth night, she told him about her ex-fiancé. "His name is Preston," she said, and Ryan could hear her moving around, pacing, probably, in whatever enormous apartment she lived in. "Preston Whitmore III. Yes, really, the third. Sounds fancy." "He is fancy. Everything about him is fancy. His watch costs more than most people's cars. He owns 3 homes. He plays golf at clubs that have waiting lists." "Sounds like a real down-to-earth guy," Ryan said dryly. Isabella laughed, and it sounded almost genuine. "He called me today, asked if we could talk about rectifying the situation." Those were his actual words. Rectifying the situation. "What did you say?" "I told him there was nothing to rectify, that I'd made my decision and I wasn't changing my mind." "How'd he take that?" "He told me I was being irrational, that I was throwing away a beneficial partnership over cold feet. Then he asked me if I was having some kind of breakdown and if I needed him to arrange for a therapist." Ryan felt anger spike in his chest. "He sounds like an asshole." "He's not an asshole, he's just limited. He sees everything as a transaction. Marriage was a transaction. Love was a transaction. And I was part of his portfolio. That's not love." "I know that now." Ryan heard something in her voice. Not regret exactly, but something close to it. "Do you miss him?" "No, that's the strangest part. I don't miss him at all. We were together for 4 years and I feel nothing about ending it except relief. What does that say about me?" "That you made the right choice." "Maybe. Or maybe it means I'm incapable of feeling what I'm supposed to feel." "You're feeling plenty," Ryan said quietly. "You just weren't feeling it for him." A long silence, then, "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Say exactly what I need to hear." "I'm not trying to. I'm just being honest." "I know. That's what makes it work." On the 5th night, Ryan was the one who called her. He hadn't planned to, but Ethan had asked him that morning if they were going to get a Christmas tree, and Ryan had said yes, even though he had no idea how he was going to afford one, and the weight of that lie had been sitting on his chest all day. So at 9 p.m., after Ethan was asleep, he picked up his phone and called the number that had become familiar. "Ryan?" Isabella answered on the second ring, and he could hear the surprise in her voice. "Hey, is this okay that I called?" "Of course. Is everything all right?" "Yeah, He stopped, suddenly feeling stupid. "Never mind. This was dumb." "Ryan, talk to me." So he did. He told her about Ethan's question, about the Christmas tree he'd promised but couldn't afford, about the lie he'd told because he couldn't stand the look on his kid's face when he said no to things. "How much does a Christmas tree cost?" Isabella asked. "Doesn't matter. I'm not asking you for money." "I know you're not. I'm just asking." $40 for a decent one. Maybe 30 if I go to the lot on the edge of town where they sell the scraggly ones." "That's nothing." "It's not nothing to me," Ryan said, harder than he meant to. "Sorry, I didn't call to complain about money." "Why did you call?" Ryan thought about it. "Because you're the only person I can talk to who doesn't need me to pretend I have it all together." "You don't have to pretend with me." "I know. That's why I called." The conversation shifted after that. Isabella told him about her own childhood Christmases, elaborate affairs with designers coming in to decorate, professional photographers, parties where she had to wear uncomfortable dresses and shake hands with strangers. "It sounds miserable," Ryan said. "It was, but I didn't know any different. I thought that's what Christmas was supposed to be." "What do you think it's supposed to be now?" "I don't know. Maybe what you have with Ethan, something real." "We don't have much," Ryan admitted. "You have each other. That's more than most people." The calls became a routine. Every night, after Ethan was asleep, Ryan's phone would ring or he'd make the call himself. They talked about everything and nothing: her work stress, his money problems, childhood memories, fears about the future. It should have stayed at that. Phone calls, conversations, a strange friendship born out of a crisis moment. But then came the morning of December 23rd. Ryan was at work, on his break, eating a protein bar that tasted like cardboard and trying to warm up his hands on a cup of break room coffee. His phone buzzed with a text. Isabella, I know this is strange, but would you have lunch with me today? Ryan stared at the message. He read it 3 times. This was crossing a line. Phone calls late at night were one thing. Meeting in person was something else entirely. He should say no. His fingers typed when and where. Isabella, there's a diner on Route 9, Mason's. Do you know it? Ryan, yeah, I can be there at noon. Isabella, thank you. Ryan shoved his phone back in his pocket and tried to convince himself this was fine. Just lunch. 2 people having lunch. Didn't mean anything, except it did. He knew it did. Mason's Diner was this kind of place that had been around for 40 years and looked it. Cracked vinyl booths, laminate tables, a jukebox in the corner that hadn't worked since the 90s. Ryan had eaten there a handful of times. The food was greasy and cheap and decent enough. He pulled into the parking lot at 5 minutes to noon and sat in his truck for a moment, second-guessing everything. This was insane. Meeting his boss's boss's boss at a diner, having secret lunch meetings like they were in some kind of spy movie. What the hell was he doing? But then he saw Isabella's car pull in, that same sleek luxury vehicle from the night she'd shown up at his house, and his heart did something complicated in his chest. She got out wearing jeans and a sweater, sunglasses covering her eyes even though it was overcast. She looked nervous. Ryan climbed out of his truck and met her at the door. Hi, she said quietly. Hi. They went inside. The lunch rush hadn't started yet, so the place was mostly empty. They took a booth in the back, away from the windows. A waitress came over with menus and coffee. You want anything? Ryan asked Isabella. Just coffee. I'm not very hungry. Ryan ordered a burger he probably wouldn't finish. The waitress left. For a moment, they just sat there, not quite looking at each other. This is weird, right? Isabella said finally. Yeah, it's weird. I shouldn't have asked you to come. I wanted to see you, not just hear your voice. I get it. Do you? Ryan met her eyes. She'd taken off the sunglasses and he could see the exhaustion there, the stress, but also something else, something that made his chest feel tight. Yeah, he said quietly. I do. The coffee was terrible, but Isabella wrapped her hands around the mug like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Ryan watched her from across the booth, noticing the way her fingers trembled slightly, the way she kept glancing toward the door like she expected someone to walk in and catch them. How long do you have? She asked. 45 minutes. I told Dale I had a doctor's appointment. You lied for me. I lied for a lunch break, Ryan corrected, but there was no heat in it. The waitress brought his burger, a greasy stack of meat and cheese that looked exactly like every other burger he'd ever ordered here. He picked up a fry, more for something to do with his hands than actual hunger. The press found out, Isabella said quietly, about the wedding. It's everywhere now. Business Journal, society pages, even some of the tabloids picked it up. They're calling it the scandal of the season. I'm sorry. Don't be. I knew it would happen. She took a sip of coffee and grimaced. My mother called me 17 times yesterday. 17. I stopped answering after the 5th. What did she say? That I've humiliated the family, that I'm throwing away my future, that Preston was the best thing that ever happened to me, and I'm going to regret this for the rest of my life. Isabella's laugh was brittle. The funny thing is, she never once asked me if I was okay, just kept talking about how this looks, how people will talk. Ryan set down his burger. Do you care? How it looks? I should. I've spent my entire life caring about appearances, building this image of myself as someone who has everything under control, someone who makes perfect decisions. She looked at him directly. But sitting here with you in this terrible diner, drinking this awful coffee, I don't care at all. The coffee's not that bad. Ryan, it tastes like burnt rubber. Okay, yeah, it's pretty bad. They both smiled, and for a moment the tension eased. Just a moment. The board is furious, Isabella continued. Not about the wedding. They don't care about my personal life. But the optics are terrible right before the quarterly review. Preston's family has connections. There's talk of them pulling their investments. Can they do that? Legally? No, but there are ways around everything when you have enough money and the right lawyers. She rubbed her temples. I have a meeting tomorrow. They're going to ask me to step down as CEO. Ryan felt something cold settle in his stomach. What? Temporarily. Until things settle. They'll phrase it as a leave of absence for personal reasons, but we both know what it really is. That's not fair. Fair doesn't matter in my world. Results matter. Perception matters. And right now I look unstable, unreliable. A woman who makes rash emotional decisions. You made the right decision, Ryan said firmly. Did I? I canceled a wedding 3 days before it was supposed to happen. I destroyed relationships with some of the most powerful families in the city. I put my company at risk. For what? Because I had some kind of epiphany standing on your porch? You did it because you deserved better than a marriage that felt like a business transaction. Isabella stared at him. You really believe that? Yeah, I do. Why? You barely know me. I know enough. Ryan leaned forward slightly. I know you showed up at my house in the middle of the night because you needed someone to tell you the truth. I know you've been calling me every night because talking to me is the only time you don't have to perform. I know that whatever life you had before, it wasn't making you happy. Happy, Isabella repeated like the word was foreign. I don't think I've thought about happiness in years. Success? Yes. Achievement? Power. But happiness? She shook her head. That wasn't part of the equation. Maybe it should have been. The waitress came by to refill their coffee. They both waited until she was gone. Tell me about Ethan, Isabella said suddenly. Ryan blinked. What about him? Anything. I want to know about your life, the real parts, not just the stuff we talk about on the phone. So Ryan told her about how Ethan was obsessed with dinosaurs but couldn't remember their names, so he made up his own. About how the kid insisted on wearing his superhero cape to school every day until the teacher finally had to ban it because other kids kept tripping over it. About the time Ethan had saved up his allowance, $1 a week, for helping with dishes, to buy Ryan a Father's Day present, and it had been a keychain shaped like a wrench because Ryan had mentioned once that his toolbox was missing one. He's 6, Ryan said. He doesn't understand that a keychain isn't the same as a real wrench. But he was so proud of himself, kept asking if I loved it. What did you say? I told him it was the best present I'd ever gotten, and I meant it. Isabella's eyes were bright. You're a good father. I'm a tired father who's barely keeping it together. That doesn't mean you're not good at it. Ryan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, a text from Dale asking where he was. His break had run 10 minutes over. I have to go, he said reluctantly. I know. Neither of them moved. Isabella, don't, she interrupted. Whatever you're about to say, don't. Not yet. Ryan nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He threw a 20 on the table, more than enough to cover his burger and both coffees, and slid out of the booth. Isabella stood too. They walked to the parking lot together, not touching, maintaining that careful distance. Thank you, she said when they reached her car. For coming, for listening. Yeah, of course. She hesitated, her hand on the car door. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you think I'm crazy for blowing up my life like this? Ryan thought about it. Really thought about it. No, I think you're brave. Scary kind of brave. The kind where you don't know what's coming next, but you jump anyway. I don't feel brave. I feel terrified. Those aren't opposites. Isabella smiled, small, genuine, sad. Then she got in her car and drove away. Ryan stood in the parking lot for a full minute after she left, trying to get his head straight. Then he drove back to work and spent the rest of his shift pretending everything was normal. The next 2 days were chaos. At work, rumors spread like wildfire. Ms. Vaughn was taking a leave of absence. Ms. Vaughn was being forced out. Ms. Vaughn had had a nervous breakdown. Nobody seemed to know what was actually true, but that didn't stop people from speculating. Ryan kept his head down and his mouth shut. At home, Ethan's excitement about Christmas was reaching peak levels. The kid had made a countdown chain out of construction paper, tearing off one link each morning and announcing how many days were left with the kind of enthusiasm only a 6-year-old could muster. 3 more days, Dad, 3! I know, buddy. Are we getting a tree today? Soon. You said that yesterday. I know. I'm working on it. Ryan had exactly $127 in his checking account. Rent was due in a week. $850 that he didn't have. The electric bill was still unpaid. He owed Mrs. Chen $40. And he'd promised his kid a Christmas tree. The math didn't work. No matter how he arranged it, the numbers didn't add up. On the night of December 23rd, his phone rang at the usual time. But when Ryan answered, Isabella's voice sounded different, flat, exhausted. "They did it," she said without preamble. "The board. They asked for my resignation." Ryan sat up straighter on the couch. "What happened?" "Exactly what I thought would happen. They framed it as a mutual decision, said I needed time to handle personal matters, offered me a generous severance package and a seat on the advisory board, basically a way to keep me quiet and keep my shares from being a problem." "What did you say?" "I said yes." Ryan was quiet. "Say something," Isabella said. "I don't know what to say. Are you okay?" "No, yes. I don't know." He heard her moving around again. "I built that company. Not from the ground up. My father did that. But I took it from a regional operation to a national one. I worked 80-hour weeks for 10 years. I sacrificed everything for it. And they just removed me. Like I was a problem to be solved." "I'm sorry." "The worst part is, I saw it coming. I knew this would happen when I called off the wedding, but I did it anyway." Her voice cracked. "What's wrong with me?" "Nothing's wrong with you." "Then why does it feel like I'm destroying everything I've ever built?" "Because you are," Ryan said honestly. "But maybe it needed to be destroyed." Silence on the other end. "Isabella, I hate that you're right." She laughed, but it sounded like crying. "I hate that some warehouse worker I barely know can see my life more clearly than I can." "Hey, don't do that." "Do what?" "Dismiss what I do. I'm not just some warehouse worker, and you're not just some CEO. We're people. That's all that matters." "Is it?" "Yeah, it is." Another long silence, then, "I'm coming to see you." Ryan's heart jumped. "What?" "Right now. I'm getting in my car and I'm coming to your house. Is that okay?" "Isabella, it's almost 10 o'clock, and tomorrow's Christmas Eve. I know what day it is. I need to see you. Please." Ryan looked down the hall toward Ethan's room. The kid was asleep, had been for an hour. The house was quiet and cold and empty except for him. "Okay," he said. "Yeah. Come over." She hung up. Ryan stood and paced the living room, running his hands through his hair. This was getting out of control. He knew it was getting out of control. But he couldn't seem to stop it. 20 minutes later, headlights swept across the living room wall. Ryan opened the door before she could knock. Isabella stood there in the same clothes she'd worn to the diner 2 days ago, looking like she'd been crying for hours. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hi." She stepped inside and Ryan closed the door against the cold. They stood in the narrow hallway, too close and not close enough. "I didn't know where else to go," Isabella said. "It's okay." "No, it's not. I'm being unfair to you. I keep showing up here like you're responsible for fixing me." "I don't think you need fixing." "Then what do I need?" Ryan looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who had everything and nothing, who'd walked away from a wedding and a career and a life that most people would kill for, who kept coming back to his shabby house because it was the only place she felt real. "I think you need someone to tell you it's going to be okay," he said quietly. "Is it going to be okay?" "I don't know, but you'll figure it out." "How can you be sure?" "Because you're here. You didn't fall apart. You didn't run back to Preston or beg the board to reconsider. You're standing here scared out of your mind, but you're standing. That counts for something." Isabella closed the distance between them in one step and kissed him. Ryan froze. For half a second, his brain completely shut down. Then something inside him broke loose and he was kissing her back, his hands coming up to frame her face, her fingers twisting in his shirt. It lasted maybe 10 seconds, maybe less. Then reality crashed back in and Ryan pulled away, breathing hard. "We can't," he said. "I know. There are so many reasons this is a bad idea." "I know," Isabella repeated. She was still close enough that he could feel her breath. I don't care. You should care. I work for your company. You just got out of an engagement. This is real, Isabella interrupted. This is real. Everything else in my life is contracts and appearances and strategy, but this is the only real thing I have. Isabella, tell me you don't feel it. Ryan closed his eyes. I can't. Then why are we fighting this? Because I have a kid asleep down the hall. Because my life is a mess. Because you're going through something huge, and you might wake up tomorrow and regret all of this. Because I've already lost everything once, and I don't think I can survive doing it again. Isabella stepped back, and Ryan felt the absence of her like a physical thing. I wouldn't do that to you, she said quietly. You don't know that. You can't know that. You're right. I can't. She wrapped her arms around herself. I should go. Yeah, probably. But again, neither of them moved. Can I just stay here for a while? Isabella asked. I won't. We don't have to do anything. I just don't want to be alone right now. Ryan knew he should say no, knew this was crossing every line they had left. But he looked at her standing in his hallway, arms wrapped tight around herself, and he couldn't do it. Okay, he said. Come on. They went to the living room. Ryan sat on one end of the couch, Isabella on the other, careful distance between them. Tell me about Sarah, Isabella said after a moment. Why? Because I want to understand what it looks like when someone actually loves someone else. So Ryan told her, not the sanitized version he'd given her before, but the real one, about how he and Sarah had met at a terrible college party, both of them too awkward to talk to anyone else, so they'd ended up in the corner making fun of the music. About how their first kiss had been clumsy and weird because they'd both been nervous. About how she used to steal his hoodies, and he'd pretend to be annoyed but secretly loved seeing her wear them. She wasn't perfect, Ryan said. She had this terrible habit of leaving cabinet doors open, drove me insane, and she was always late to everything. We missed the first 10 minutes of every movie we ever went to because she couldn't get ready on time. But you loved her anyway. I loved her because of it, because she was real and messy and human. He paused. When she died, people kept telling me I'd find someone else. Like she was replaceable. Like love was just a slot you filled with whoever was available. But it doesn't work that way. Do you still love her? Yeah, always will. But it's different now. It's less like missing a person and more like missing a version of myself that doesn't exist anymore. Isabella was quiet for a long time. I've never felt that way about anyone. Not even Preston? Especially not Preston. I liked him. I respected him, but love? No. I don't think I even knew what that word meant until... She stopped. Until what? Until I met you. Ryan's breath caught. Isabella, I know it's too fast and too complicated and probably just my brain trying to fill the void Preston left. But when I'm with you, everything feels different, clearer, like I've been living my whole life in black and white and suddenly there's color. That's just the crisis talking. You're going through something massive. Your brain is looking for an anchor, and I happen to be there. Is that what you really think? Ryan didn't answer, couldn't answer, because the truth was, he didn't know what he thought. His life had been so carefully controlled for 3 years. Work, Ethan, bills, survival. No room for anything else. No room for feelings that didn't serve a purpose. But Isabella had smashed through all of that like a wrecking ball, and now he was sitting here at 10:30 at night with his boss's boss's boss, and all he could think about was how right she felt in his space. I think, he said carefully, that we both need to be really careful here. Because if we do this, if we let this become something and it falls apart, we both have a lot to lose. What do you have to lose? You already said your life is a mess. Exactly. Which means I can't afford for it to get messier. I've got Ethan to think about. I can't bring someone into his life who might not stay. I would stay. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Isabella, you literally just left a 4-year relationship 3 days ago. You don't know what you want. I know I don't want to go back to the life I had. I know I don't want to be alone. And I know that every time I'm with you, I feel like maybe I'm not as broken as I thought. Ryan scrubbed his hands over his face. This is insane. I know. We barely know each other. I know. And even if we wanted to try, which I'm not saying we should, you're still technically my employer. There are rules about this kind of thing. I resigned. As of tomorrow, I'm not your employer. That doesn't change the power dynamic. You're still, he gestured vaguely. You, rich, powerful, connected, and I'm barely making rent. So? So that's a problem, Isabella. That's a huge problem. What happens when you realize you're slumming it with a warehouse worker? When your friends find out? When your mother finds out? I don't care what they think. You should, because eventually it'll matter. Eventually you'll wake up and realize you gave up your entire life for someone who can't even afford to take you on a real date. Isabella stood abruptly. Ryan thought she was leaving, but instead she came around the coffee table and sat down next to him. Close. Too close. Listen to me, she said. I have spent 30 years caring what other people think, building my life around other people's expectations, and it made me miserable. So if I'm going to blow everything up, I want it to be for something real, someone real. You're not thinking straight. Maybe not, but I'm thinking clearer than I have in years. She leaned in. Ryan should have moved away, should have stopped this before it started again. But he didn't. This time when they kissed, it wasn't desperate or urgent. It was slow, careful, like they were both testing whether this could actually be something. Ryan's phone buzzed. They broke apart. He grabbed it, his heart pounding. Text from Dale. Emergency at the warehouse. Pipe burst. Need all hands. Can you come in tonight? Ryan stared at the screen. It was almost 11 p.m. Ethan was asleep. He'd have to wake Mrs. Chen, who was already doing him a favor watching Ethan in the mornings. What's wrong? Isabella asked. Work emergency. They need me to come in. Right now? Yeah. He stood, already running through the logistics in his head. I have to wake up my neighbor, see if she can watch Ethan. If not, I'll have to bring him with me and hope he sleeps in the break room. I'll watch him. Ryan stopped. What? I'll stay here. Watch Ethan. You go handle the emergency. Isabella, you can't. Why not? He's asleep. I'll just be here in case he wakes up, which he probably won't. You don't know how to take care of a kid. I think I can manage keeping a sleeping 6-year-old alive for a few hours. Ryan wanted to argue, but he didn't have time, and the alternative was waking Mrs. Chen or dragging Ethan out into the cold. Okay, he said. Okay, but if he wakes up, call me immediately, and don't let him know you're here. If he asks, tell him you're a friend from work. I am a friend from work. You know what I mean. Ryan grabbed his jacket and keys. He showed Isabella where Ethan's room was, where the kitchen was, where everything was. He was halfway out the door when he turned back. Thank you, he said. Go. We'll be fine. Ryan drove to the warehouse going 20 over the speed limit, his mind racing. He'd just left Isabella Vaughn alone in his house with his sleeping kid. This was insane. This was beyond insane. But he didn't have a choice. The warehouse was chaos when he arrived. Water everywhere, people scrambling with mops and buckets, Dale yelling orders. Ryan jumped in, helping move inventory away from the flooded areas, helping patch the burst pipe with duct tape and prayers until a real plumber could get there. It took 3 hours. 3 hours of physical labor and stress, and Ryan's phone staying mercifully silent. No calls from Isabella. No emergencies. When he finally got back in his truck at 2 a.m., exhausted and soaked to the knees, he checked his phone. One text from Isabella. We're okay. He didn't wake up. Drive safe. Ryan sat there in the dark parking lot, staring at that message, something strange and warm unfurling in his chest. Then he drove home. The house was dark when he got there, except for one lamp in the living room. Isabella was asleep on the couch, curled up under the blanket Ryan kept there, her phone still in her hand. He stood there for a moment, just looking at her. This woman who had everything and gave it all up, who was sleeping on his terrible couch because she'd volunteered to watch his kid, who kissed him like he was something precious. Ryan knelt down beside the couch. Isabella. She stirred, her eyes opening slowly. You're back. Yeah. Everything okay? Fine. He didn't even move. She sat up, pushing hair out of her face. How's the warehouse? Wet, but manageable. Ryan hesitated. You didn't have to stay. I wanted to. They looked at each other in the dim light. Ryan saw the moment something shifted in her expression, the moment she decided to be brave. I meant what I said earlier, Isabella said quietly, about this being real. I know. Do you feel it too? Ryan closed his eyes, opened them. Yeah, I do. So what do we do about it? I don't know, but we should probably figure it out before this gets any more complicated. Isabella smiled, tired but genuine. I think we're already past that point. She was probably right. They were definitely past that point. But as Ryan helped her up from the couch and walked her to the door, as they said goodnight without kissing, because they both knew if they started again they wouldn't stop, as he watched her drive away into the December darkness, he couldn't bring himself to care about complicated. For the first time in 3 years, something in his life felt less like survival and more like living. Ryan woke up 3 hours later to Ethan jumping on his bed. Dad, it's Christmas Eve. We still don't have a tree, Ryan groaned and pulled the pillow over his head. His entire body ached from the warehouse work, and his brain felt like it had been stuffed with cotton. Ethan, buddy, it's not even 7 yet. So, we need a tree. You promised. The guilt hit Ryan like a punch to the gut. He had promised, multiple times. And here it was, Christmas Eve morning, and they still didn't have one because he'd been too broke and too distracted by a woman who had no business being in his life. Okay, he said, forcing himself to sit up. Okay, we'll get a tree today. Really? Really? Ethan's face lit up like someone had plugged him into an electrical socket. Can we get a big one? With lights? We'll see what we can afford, bud. Ryan dragged himself out of bed and into the shower. The hot water felt like a miracle on his sore muscles, but it didn't do much for the exhaustion or the anxiety gnawing at his chest. He needed to make today work, needed to give Ethan something that felt like Christmas, even if it was held together with tape and hope. After cereal and the ongoing battle to get Ethan into actual winter clothes instead of just his superhero cape, they climbed into the truck. The lot on the edge of town, the one with the scraggly trees Ryan had mentioned to Isabella, was already busy despite the early hour. Families wandered between rows of evergreens, kids pointing and parents debating heights and prices. Ryan parked and helped Ethan out. The kid immediately took off running toward the trees, his cape flapping behind him despite Ryan's earlier protests. Ethan, stay where I can see you. I will. Ryan followed more slowly, checking price tags as he went. $45, $50, $60 for anything decent-sized. He had $30 in his wallet, the absolute most he could spare and still eat next week. Dad, this one! Ethan was standing in front of a tree that was maybe 5 feet tall, sparse in places, with a weird bend in the middle. It was objectively not a good tree, but Ethan was looking at it like it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Ryan checked the tag. $25. You like this one? He asked. It's perfect. It looks like it needs us. Something in Ryan's chest twisted. Yeah, okay, this one's good. They paid and Ryan wrestled the tree into the truck bed, tying it down with bungee cords that had seen better days. Ethan sat in the cab vibrating with excitement, asking approximately 400 questions about when they could decorate it and whether they had enough ornaments and if they could make popcorn strings like in the movies. We'll figure it out, Ryan said for the 10th time. When they got home, the tree looked even worse in the daylight streaming through their living room window. But Ethan didn't care. He helped Ryan set it up in the corner, using the ancient stand Ryan had found at a yard sale 2 years ago. It tilted slightly to the left, but they propped it with books and called it fixed. The ornaments were a sad collection, some plastic balls from the dollar store, a few that Sarah had made years ago, and exactly one string of lights that only half worked. Ryan hung what they had while Ethan supervised, offering commentary on which branches needed more decorations. There, Ryan said, plugging in the lights. Half of them flickered on, casting a weak glow. What do you think? Ethan stared at the tree with complete awe. It's the best tree ever. Ryan looked at the crooked, half-lit, barely decorated tree and felt his throat tighten. Yeah, bud. It really is. His phone buzzed, text from Isabella. How are you? Ryan glanced at Ethan, who was now lying on his stomach staring up at the tree like it was going to do tricks, and stepped into the kitchen. Ryan. Tired. Got home at 2:30, up at 6:45. Currently the proud owner of the saddest Christmas tree in America. Isabella. I'm sure it's lovely. Ryan. You have clearly never seen a tree that costs $25. Isabella. Can I come see it? Ryan stopped, his fingers hovering over the screen. Letting Isabella come to his house again was dangerous. Last night had already pushed things too far, but he wanted to see her. Wanted it more than was reasonable or smart. Ryan. Ethan's home. It might be weird. Isabella. I don't mind if you don't. Mind if you... Ryan looked back at the living room where Ethan was now attempting to rearrange the ornaments to his own specifications. Ryan. Come over, but just as a friend from work, okay? Isabella. Okay. She arrived 20 minutes later in jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than Ryan's monthly rent, but somehow looked normal on her. Ryan opened the door and tried not to think about how the last time she'd been here, they'd kissed on his couch. Hi, she said. Hi. Dad, Ethan's voice from behind him. Who's that? Ryan turned. Ethan was standing in the hallway, looking at Isabella with the kind of intense curiosity only small children possessed. This is my friend Isabella, Ryan said. She works at the same company I do. Oh. Ethan studied her. Do you want to see our tree? Isabella smiled, genuine and warm. I would love to see your tree. Ethan grabbed her hand without hesitation and dragged her into the living room. Ryan followed, watching as his son showed off their crooked, sad little tree with the pride of someone presenting a masterpiece. We got it this morning, Ethan explained. It's not big, but Dad says it's perfect for us. And see? I put this ornament here because it's my favorite. It's a snowman, but his nose fell off, so now he's just a snow dude with no nose. Isabella crouched down to Ethan's level, examining the ornament seriously. I think he's distinguished, very avant-garde. What's avant-garde? It means unique, special. Yeah, Ethan beamed. That's exactly what he is. Ryan leaned against the doorframe, watching them. Isabella was a natural with Ethan, patient, genuinely interested, not talking down to him the way some adults did with kids. It should have made him happy. Instead, it scared him. Because this was starting to feel real in a way that went beyond late-night phone calls and stolen moments. Do you want to help decorate? Ethan asked Isabella. She glanced at Ryan. He shrugged, as if to say your call. I'd love to, Isabella said. The next hour was surreal. Isabella Vaughn, former CEO of Meridian Logistics, sat on Ryan's living room floor, helping a 6-year-old make paper snowflakes and construction paper chains. She didn't complain about getting glitter on her expensive sweater or about Ethan's rambling stories about dinosaurs and superheroes. Ryan made hot chocolate, the cheap powdered kind mixed with water because they were out of milk, and brought it to them in mismatched mugs. This is good, Isabella said, though Ryan knew for a fact it was terrible. You're a bad liar. Maybe. But I'm having a good time, so that part's true. Ethan glued another paper ring onto his chain, then looked up at Isabella. Are you Dad's girlfriend? Ryan choked on his hot chocolate. Isabella's eyes went wide. What? Ryan managed. No, why would you? Because you're smiling at her the way you smiled at Mom in the pictures, Ethan said matter-of-factly, then went back to his glue stick. The room went very quiet. Ryan didn't know what to say, how to explain this to his 6-year-old when he couldn't even explain it to himself. I'm your dad's friend, Isabella said gently, but I like him very much, and I think you're pretty great too. Ethan considered this. Okay. Do you want to watch movies with us tonight? We always watch movies on Christmas Eve. Dad lets me stay up late. Ethan, Ryan started. I'd like that, Isabella said. If it's okay with your dad. Ryan looked at her. She looked back. And in that moment, some unspoken thing passed between them. An acknowledgement that they were past the point of pretending this was casual. Past the point of keeping distance. Yeah, Ryan said quietly. It's okay. Isabella stayed. They finished decorating the tree, such as it was. They made more terrible hot chocolate. Ethan insisted on showing Isabella every single one of his drawings, narrating elaborate stories about each one. She listened to all of it with the same attention she probably gave to quarterly earnings reports. Around 5, Ryan ordered pizza because cooking felt like too much effort and he had just enough on his credit card to cover it. They ate on the couch, Ethan between them, talking nonstop about what he thought Santa might bring. I know we can't get big stuff, Ethan said seriously, but maybe something small like a new superhero cape. Mine has a hole. I noticed, Isabella said. It's very distinguished. Ethan giggled. You say everything is distinguished. Because it's true. After dinner, they put on a Christmas movie, one of those stop-motion classics that had been on TV since Ryan was a kid. Ethan lasted about 40 minutes before his eyes started drooping. I'm not tired, he insisted, even as he yawned. Sure you're not, Ryan said. Come on, buddy, bedtime. But the movie, we'll finish it tomorrow. Promise? Promise. Ryan carried Ethan to his room. The kid was already half asleep, and tucked him in. He stood there for a moment, looking down at his son, this small, perfect person who deserved so much more than Ryan could give him. Love you, Ethan, he whispered. Love you too, Dad, Ethan mumbled, already drifting off. When Ryan came back to the living room, Isabella was still on the couch, staring at the tree with its crooked lights and homemade decorations. He's amazing, she said quietly. You're doing an incredible job with him. I'm barely holding it together most days. That's what makes it incredible. Ryan sat down next to her, leaving space between them out of habit, even though the space felt wrong now. Thank you, for today, for being so good with him. I wasn't performing, if that's what you're worried about. I genuinely enjoyed it. I know, that's what scares me. Isabella turned to look at him. Why? Because this is starting to feel like something real, like something that could actually work. And I can't... He stopped, rubbed his face. I can't let myself believe that. Not when there are so many ways this could go wrong. Name one. You're rich and I'm broke. You're used to a certain lifestyle and I can barely afford pizza. You just left an engagement and might wake up tomorrow and realize this was all just crisis-driven confusion. Stop, Isabella interrupted. Stop making decisions for me. Stop assuming you know what I want or what I can handle. I'm here. I chose to be here. I keep choosing to be here. For how long? What happens when reality sets in? When you remember that I work in a warehouse and live in a rental that's falling apart? When your friends ask about me and you have to explain, I don't care about my friends. I don't care about the money or the lifestyle or any of it. Isabella moved closer. Do you want to know what I was thinking about today? While I was sitting on your floor making paper chains with your son? What? I was thinking that this is the first time in my entire life that I felt like I belonged somewhere. Not because of my name or my position or what I could do for people, but just because I was there. Me. And that was enough. Ryan's throat felt tight. Isabella, I love you, she said simply. I know it's too soon and too complicated and probably makes me sound crazy, but I do. And I think you feel the same way, but you're too scared to admit it. Of course I'm scared. I have everything to lose. So do I, Isabella said. I've lost my job, my engagement, my reputation. I've burned every bridge I had, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat because it led me here. To you. Ryan closed his eyes. This is insane. I know. We barely know each other. I know that too. And if this doesn't work, then it doesn't work, Isabella said. But at least we tried. At least we were brave enough to try. Ryan opened his eyes and looked at her. Really looked at her. This woman who'd had everything and walked away from it. Who sat on his floor making crafts with his kid. Who looked at his terrible tree and his terrible house and his terrible life and saw something worth staying for. I'm terrified, he admitted. Me too. I don't know how to do this. How to let someone in again. Neither do I, so we'll figure it out together. Ryan leaned forward and kissed her, slow and careful and full of everything he couldn't say out loud. Isabella kissed him back, her hands coming up to frame his face, and for the first time in 3 years, Ryan let himself believe that maybe, possibly, things could actually be okay. They broke apart eventually, both breathing hard. Stay tonight, Ryan said. Just stay. Sleep on the couch. I just want you here. Okay? They didn't watch the rest of the movie. They just sat on the couch, Isabella leaning against Ryan's shoulder, his arm around her, watching the lights on the terrible tree blink on and off. It should have been awkward. It should have felt too fast, too much, too everything. But it didn't. It felt like the first thing that had made sense in a very long time. Around midnight, Isabella's phone rang. She looked at the screen and her expression shifted, something hard and closed off, sliding into place. It's my mother, she said. You don't have to answer. I probably should. She's called 12 times today. Isabella stood and walked to the kitchen, answering the phone with a crisp, "Hello, Mother." Ryan couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but he could hear Isabella's responses. "I'm aware of what day it is. No, I'm not coming to the house because I don't want to. That's not fair and you know it, but Mother, I'm 30 years old. I'm allowed to make my own decisions. No, I'm not having a breakdown. It doesn't matter where I am." Her voice was getting tighter, more strained. Ryan stood and walked to the kitchen doorway. "I don't care what Preston's family thinks," Isabella was saying, "or what the board thinks, or what you think. I'm done living my life for other people. No, you don't get to— Mother, I'm hanging up now." She ended the call and stood there gripping her phone, her shoulders rigid. "You okay?" Ryan asked quietly. "She wants me to come home, spend Christmas with the family, pretend everything's fine, and I haven't embarrassed them." Isabella's laugh was bitter. "She actually said that I've embarrassed them. I'm sorry. Don't be. This is who she is, who they all are. Everything is about image, about maintaining the facade." She turned to face him. "She asked where I was. I told her I was with a friend. She asked which friend, wanted a name, probably so she could vet whether they were appropriate, and I realized I didn't want to lie anymore." "What did you say?" "I told her I was with someone who actually cares about me as a person, not as a portfolio asset." Then I hung up. Ryan crossed the kitchen and pulled her into a hug. Isabella wrapped her arms around him and just held on. "I meant what I said earlier," she said against his shoulder, "about loving you. I know it's fast, I know it doesn't make sense, but it's true." "I know," Ryan said, "and for the record, I love you too, even though it scares the hell out of me." Isabella pulled back enough to look at him. Her eyes were bright with tears, but she was smiling. "Yeah?" "Yeah." She kissed him again, softer this time. When they broke apart, she said, "What do we do now?" "I have no idea," Ryan admitted, "but we'll figure it out." They went back to the couch. Isabella curled up against him, her head on his chest, and Ryan pulled the blanket over both of them. The tree lights continued their erratic blinking. Outside it had started to snow, fat, lazy flakes drifting past the window. "Ryan?" Isabella's voice was quiet, already heavy with sleep. "Yeah? Thank you for letting me stay, for not pushing me away. Thank you for not giving up on me." "Never," she murmured. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other on Ryan's terrible couch, under the glow of their crooked Christmas tree. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what either of them had planned, but it was real and honest and theirs. Ryan woke a few hours later, his neck stiff and his arm numb from Isabella sleeping on it. The first light of Christmas morning was filtering through the windows, painting everything pale gray and gold. He looked down at Isabella, her face peaceful in sleep, her hair falling across her cheek. He looked at the tree with its homemade decorations and broken lights. He thought about Ethan asleep down the hall, probably already dreaming about whatever small gifts Ryan had managed to scrape together. This was his life now, complicated and messy and full of uncertainty, but also full of something he'd thought he'd lost forever. Hope. Down the hall he heard Ethan's door open, small footsteps padding toward the living room. "Dad?" Ethan's sleepy voice. "Is it Christmas?" Isabella stirred against him, her eyes opening slowly. She looked confused for a second, then remembered where she was. She started to move, but Ryan held her gently. "Yeah, buddy," he called back. "It's Christmas." Ethan appeared in the doorway, still in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes. He saw Isabella on the couch, and his face lit up. "Isabella stayed," he said, like this was the best present he could have asked for. "Is that okay?" Isabella asked, sitting up and trying to smooth her hair. "Yeah, now we have 3 people for Christmas instead of just 2. Ryan felt something crack open in his chest, some last piece of resistance he'd been holding on to. Because Ethan was right. They did have 3 people now. And maybe that was exactly what they needed. "Come here, bud," Ryan said, and Ethan ran over and climbed onto the couch between them. "Can we open presents now? It's barely 6 a.m. "So?" Ryan and Isabella looked at each other over Ethan's head. She was smiling, really smiling, soft and genuine and happy. "Why not?" Ryan said. "It's Christmas." The presents were small. For Ethan, Ryan had managed a new superhero cape from the thrift store and a coloring book with markers. The kid acted like Ryan had handed him treasure, immediately putting on the cape and declaring it the best cape ever. "I didn't know you'd be here," Ryan said to Isabella, "so I don't have anything for you." "That's okay. I didn't bring anything either." She paused. "Actually, that's not entirely true." Isabella pulled out her phone and made a call. Ryan listened to her talk to someone about delivery and addresses, increasingly confused. "What are you doing?" he asked when she hung up. "You'll see. It should be here in about an hour." "Isabella? Don't argue. Just trust me." An hour later, there was a knock at the door. Ryan opened it to find a delivery truck in his driveway and two guys unloading boxes. "Delivery for Carter residents," one of them said. Ryan stared. "What is this?" "Christmas gifts," Isabella said from behind him. "I made some calls this morning." The boxes kept coming. Food. Actual good food. The kind Ryan never bought because it was too expensive. New bedding for Ethan's bed. Winter coats that actually fit. A coffee maker that probably cost more than Ryan's truck. Toys for Ethan that made the kid scream with excitement. "Isabella," Ryan said, overwhelmed, "this is too much." "It's not. And before you argue, just know that I didn't do this to show off or to make you feel bad. I did it because I wanted to. Because you deserve nice things. Because Ethan deserves nice things. And because I can actually afford it." Ryan wanted to protest. Wanted to say this wasn't right, that he couldn't accept this much from her. But Ethan was literally vibrating with joy, pulling toys out of boxes and showing them to Isabella like she'd hung the moon, and Ryan couldn't bring himself to ruin it. "Thank you," he said quietly. Isabella took his hand and squeezed. "You're welcome." They spent the morning on the living room floor, Ethan playing with his new toys while Ryan and Isabella drank coffee from the new coffee maker, which did, in fact, make much better coffee than the old one. "I have to tell you something," Isabella said during a moment when Ethan was distracted. "What?" "I talked to my lawyer yesterday. I'm going to use my severance to start something new. A foundation, maybe. Something that actually helps people instead of just making rich people richer. That's amazing. And I was thinking that Meridian has a lot of good people working there who don't get recognized. People like you who show up every day and do the work and actually care. I want to do something about that. Create programs, better benefits, opportunities for advancement." Ryan looked at her. "You're going to change the company from the outside." "I'm going to try. And I was hoping you might help me. You know these people. You know what they need. I'm just a warehouse worker." "Stop saying that like it makes you less than anyone else," Isabella said firmly. "You're smart and capable, and you understand things that people like me miss because we're too far removed from the actual work. I don't know. Just think about it. No pressure." Ethan ran over with a new action figure, insisting they had to see how it worked. The conversation shifted, but Ryan kept turning Isabella's words over in his mind. The idea that he could actually do something bigger, make a real difference. It was terrifying, but also exciting in a way nothing had been in years. Later that afternoon, after Ethan had crashed from his sugar and excitement high and was napping on the couch, Ryan and Isabella sat at the kitchen table. "I need to figure out my living situation," Isabella said. "I can't stay in my penthouse. Too many memories. Too much of the old life." "What are you thinking?" "Something smaller. Something real." She paused. "Maybe something near you." Ryan's heart jumped. "Near me? If that's okay. I'm not suggesting we move in together or anything. That would be crazy, but maybe nearby. So we can actually try this, see if it works." "You'd really do that? Give up your penthouse to live in this neighborhood?" "Ryan, I've given up everything else. A smaller apartment is nothing." "It's not nothing," Ryan said. It's everything. It's you choosing this life, choosing me and Ethan and all the complicated, messy reality that comes with us." "I know what I'm choosing," Isabella said. "I'm choosing to be happy, finally." They sat there in Ryan's cramped kitchen, holding hands across the table, while snow continued to fall outside and Ethan snored softly on the couch. It wasn't perfect. There were still so many questions, so many things to figure out. Ryan still had bills he couldn't pay and a job that barely covered expenses. Isabella still had the fallout from her broken engagement to deal with, and a future that was completely uncertain. But for the first time in years, Ryan wasn't just surviving. He was living. The week between Christmas and New Year's felt like living in a snow globe, beautiful and fragile and completely separate from the rest of the world. Isabella found a furnished apartment 3 blocks from Ryan's house, a modest 2-bedroom that probably cost less per month than she used to spend on shoes. She signed a 6-month lease and moved in with 2 suitcases and nothing else. "I'll get furniture eventually," she said when Ryan came over to see the place. "But honestly, I don't need much." The apartment was plain, beige walls, basic appliances, carpet that had seen better days. But there was a window that got good morning light, and the neighbors seemed quiet, and it was hers in a way the penthouse never had been. "It's perfect," Ryan said, and meant it. They fell into a routine that felt both natural and strange. Isabella would come over in the evenings after Ryan got home from work. They'd make dinner together. Nothing fancy, just regular food that Ryan actually knew how to cook. Ethan would show her his latest drawings or demand she play superheroes with him, and Isabella would get down on the floor in her jeans and do ridiculous voices that made the kid laugh until his stomach hurt. On New Year's Eve, they stayed in. Ethan made it to 9 p.m. before falling asleep on the couch, his new cape still tied around his neck. Ryan carried him to bed while Isabella cleaned up the remains of their makeshift party. Pizza boxes and juice pouches, and the confetti Ethan had insisted on throwing at 8 o'clock because waiting until midnight was too many hours away. When Ryan came back, Isabella was standing by the window, watching snowfall in the yellow glow of the streetlight. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How different this is from last year. Last New Year's Eve, I was at some charity gala in a designer dress, drinking champagne that cost more than most people's car payments. Preston was networking with hedge fund managers. I spent the entire night smiling and making small talk and feeling absolutely nothing. And now? Now I'm in your living room wearing sweatpants, eating leftover pizza, and I've never been happier." She turned to face him. "Is that crazy?" "Probably," Ryan said, "but I don't care." They kissed at midnight, or what they thought was midnight, since neither of them had actually been watching the clock that closely. Outside, someone in the neighborhood set off fireworks that sounded more like gunshots, and a car alarm started wailing, and it was nothing like the elegant celebrations Isabella was used to. It was better. But reality had a way of crashing back in, and it started the first week of January. Ryan got called into Dale's office on a Tuesday morning. His supervisor looked uncomfortable, shuffling papers on his desk and not quite meeting Ryan's eyes. "What's going on?" Ryan asked, already feeling dread settle in his stomach. "Look, this is awkward," Dale said, "but there's been some talk about you and Ms. Vaughn." Ryan's blood went cold. "What kind of talk?" "People have seen you together. At that diner on Route 9. Someone saw her leaving your house early one morning." Dale held up his hand before Ryan could speak. "I'm not judging. Your personal life is your business. But HR is asking questions. They're worried about impropriety, conflict of interest, that kind of thing. She doesn't work here anymore. She resigned." "I know, but she was your superior when you started seeing her, right? And there are policies about that kind of thing." Ryan felt anger spike hot in his chest. "We didn't start seeing each other until after she left. And even if we had, it's nobody's business but ours." "I agree with you, man. I do. But I'm just telling you what's coming down the pipeline. HR wants to meet with you, probably just to cover their bases, make sure everything was above board." "When?" "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Ryan left Dale's office feeling like he'd been punched. He made it through his shift on autopilot, his mind racing. What if they fired him? What if this whole thing with Isabella cost him his job? He couldn't afford to lose this job. He could barely afford life with it. He didn't tell Isabella right away, didn't want to worry her, didn't want her to feel responsible. But she knew something was wrong the moment she saw him that evening. "What happened?" she asked. Ryan told her, watched her face go from concerned to angry to guilty in the span of 30 seconds. "This is my fault," she said. "I shouldn't have come to the warehouse, shouldn't have been so visible. I put your job at risk." "You didn't do anything wrong, didn't I?" "I was your boss, Ryan. Even if we didn't start anything until after I resigned, it still looks bad, and now you're paying the price for my decisions." "Our decisions," Ryan corrected. "We're in this together, remember?" But Isabella was already pulling out her phone. "I'm calling my lawyer. This is harassment. They can't punish you for my personal choices." "Isabella, stop." No, I won't let them do this to you. I won't let you lose your job because of me. Then what do you suggest? Because fighting this just makes it worse, makes it look like we have something to hide. Isabella stopped pacing, her phone still in her hand. So what do we do? I go to the meeting tomorrow, answer their questions honestly, and hope they decide there's nothing to investigate. And if they don't? Ryan didn't have an answer for that. The HR meeting was exactly as uncomfortable as Ryan expected. Two people he'd never met before, a man in an ill-fitting suit and a woman with a clipboard, sat across from him in a windowless conference room and asked questions that felt designed to trap him. When did you first have contact with Ms. Vaughn outside of work? Did she ever show you preferential treatment? Did your relationship with her influence any business decisions? Were you aware of the company policy regarding fraternization? Ryan answered everything truthfully. No, they hadn't started anything while she was still CEO. No, she'd never given him special treatment at work. No, their relationship had nothing to do with business. Yes, he was aware of the policy, and no, he hadn't violated it. The man took notes. The woman watched him with an expression that gave nothing away. We'll be in touch, she said finally. That's it? For now? We may have follow-up questions. Ryan left feeling like he'd just been through an interrogation. He went back to the warehouse floor and threw himself into work, trying not to think about what would happen if they decided to fire him anyway. But the real blow came that afternoon when his phone rang during his break. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Hello? Mr. Carter? This is Margaret Whitmore, Preston Whitmore's mother. Ryan's entire body went rigid. How did you get this number? That's not important. What is important is that you stay away from Isabella. Excuse me? I know what you're doing. You saw an opportunity with a vulnerable woman and you took it, but I won't let you ruin her life. Ryan felt rage building in his chest, hot and sharp. You don't know anything about me or Isabella or what we have. I know you're a nobody with nothing. I know Isabella is confused and making terrible decisions. And I know that if you actually cared about her, you'd walk away before you drag her down to your level. My level. You work in a warehouse, Mr. Carter. You live in a rental house with your illegitimate child. You have nothing to offer someone like Isabella except to make her ordinary. Is that what you want? To turn her into another struggling single mother, counting pennies and wondering where her life went? Ryan hung up. His hands were shaking with anger. He wanted to throw his phone across the parking lot, wanted to scream, but he just stood there, breathing hard, trying to get control of himself. Because the worst part was that Margaret Whitmore's words echoed thoughts Ryan had already had himself. What did he have to offer Isabella? What kind of future could he give her? He'd been so caught up in the feeling of being with her that he hadn't let himself think about the reality of it. Isabella deserved better than this. Better than a life of struggle and uncertainty. Better than him. That thought sat in his chest like a stone for the rest of the day. When Isabella came over that evening, Ryan was quiet, distant. She noticed immediately. What's wrong? She asked. Nothing. Just tired. Don't lie to me. Something happened. Ryan didn't want to tell her, didn't want to give Margaret Whitmore's poison any air. But Isabella kept pushing, and finally he broke. Preston's mother called me today, told me to stay away from you, said I was dragging you down. Isabella's face went pale, then red. She what? It doesn't matter. It absolutely matters. What exactly did she say? Ryan told her. All of it. The parts about him being a nobody, about dragging Isabella down to his level, about ruining her life. Isabella listened with an expression that progressed from angry to furious to something that looked almost dangerous. That woman, she said when he finished, has no right to speak about you that way. No right to speak about us that way. But is she wrong? What? Is she wrong? Ryan repeated. Because I've been thinking about it and maybe she has a point. What kind of life can I give you? I'm barely keeping my head above water. I'm one missed paycheck away from eviction. I can't take you on real dates or buy you nice things or give you any of the stuff you're used to. I don't want any of that stuff. You say that now, but what about in 6 months? A year? What happens when the novelty of playing house wears off and you realize you gave up everything for a guy who can't even afford a Christmas tree without having a crisis about it? Ryan, stop. I'm serious, Isabella. Maybe Preston's mother's right. Maybe the best thing I can do for you is walk away before I ruin your life. Isabella stared at him for a long moment. Then she stood up, grabbed her coat, and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Ryan asked. "To have a conversation that's long overdue." She left before he could stop her. Isabella drove to the Whitmore estate, a sprawling mansion in the kind of neighborhood where security gates were standard and the houses were measured in wings rather than bedrooms. She'd been here dozens of times over the 4 years she'd dated Preston, had attended dinner parties and charity events, and uncomfortable holiday gatherings where everyone smiled and made small talk and nobody said anything real. She rang the bell and waited. Preston answered. He looked exactly the same as the last time she'd seen him, perfectly groomed, perfectly dressed, perfectly controlled. When he saw her, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe? Or annoyance. "Isabella, this is unexpected. Is your mother home? I assume this isn't a social call." "Preston, is she home or not?" He stepped aside without another word. Isabella walked into the foyer, all marble and crystal and expensive art that nobody actually looked at. Margaret Whitmore appeared at the top of the stairs, descending with the kind of regal bearing that came from generations of old money and unexamined privilege. "Isabella," she said coolly, "I wasn't expecting you." "I know what you did, calling Ryan, threatening him." Margaret's expression didn't change. "I did no such thing. I simply had a conversation with a young man who seemed to be under some misapprehension about his place in your life. His place in my life is none of your business. It became my business when you humiliated my son and our families with your reckless behavior. It became my business when you threw away a perfectly good marriage for some warehouse worker who can barely support his own child." Isabella felt something snap inside her. That warehouse worker has more integrity in his little finger than everyone in this house combined. He works harder than Preston ever has. He cares about people, actually cares, not just as networking opportunities or tax write-offs. And he sees me, actually sees me, not just as an asset or an image or a trophy. "How romantic," Margaret said dryly. "And how will you pay your bills on romance? What happens when the electricity gets shut off because your warehouse worker can't make rent? What happens when his child needs something and you have to choose between helping them and maintaining your lifestyle?" "I don't care about the lifestyle. I never did. You did. Preston did. But I'm done living for other people's expectations." "You're being childish." "No, I'm being honest. For the first time in my life, I'm being honest about what I actually want instead of what I'm supposed to want." Preston, who'd been standing silently by the door, finally spoke up. "Isabella, be reasonable. You're upset, you're going through something, but you don't have to burn everything down. We can work this out. The wedding is off, fine, but you don't have to throw away your entire life for some fantasy about true love." Isabella looked at him, this man she'd almost married, this man she'd spent 4 years with and never really known. "It's not a fantasy, Preston. That's what you don't understand. What Ryan and I have is more real than anything you and I ever had. And I'd rather struggle with him than live in comfort with someone who makes me feel empty." "You'll regret this," Margaret said. "When the money runs out and the struggle becomes real and that man can't give you what you need, you'll regret this. And we won't be here to pick up the pieces." "Good," Isabella said, "because I don't want you to be." She turned and walked out, didn't look back, got in her car, and drove away from that house and that life and everything it represented. By the time she got back to Ryan's place, her hands were shaking and her eyes were burning with tears she refused to let fall. She knocked on the door harder than she meant to. Ryan opened it, his expression cautious. "Isabella, no, my turn to talk." She pushed past him into the house. "Your turn to listen." Ryan closed the door and waited. "I just went to see Preston and his mother," Isabella said. "I told them exactly what I thought of their opinions about my life and my choices. I told them I didn't care about the money or the lifestyle or any of it, and I meant it." "Isabella, I'm not done. You think you don't have anything to offer me? You think I'm going to wake up one day and regret choosing you? Let me tell you what you have to offer. You have kindness. You have integrity. You have a capacity for love that most people never find. You show up every single day and do the hard work of being a good person, even when it costs you, even when nobody's watching. That's worth more than all the money in the world. You say that now. Stop telling me what I'll feel later. Stop making decisions for me. I know what I'm choosing. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing Ethan. I'm choosing a life that's real instead of a life that looks good from the outside. Ryan rubbed his face. What if I can't do this? What if I can't be what you need? What if you can? Isabella countered. What if we actually make this work? What if we build something together that's better than anything either of us could have had alone? That's a lot of what ifs. Life is nothing but what ifs. The only question is whether you're brave enough to try. Ryan looked at her, this woman who'd walked away from everything for him, who'd just faced down her ex-fiancé and his family to defend what they had, who was standing in his living room with tears in her eyes asking him to be brave. And he realized something. He'd been so focused on what he couldn't give her that he'd forgotten what he could. He could give her honesty, partnership, a life built on something real instead of appearances. He could love her the way she deserved to be loved, fully, completely, without reservation. Okay, he said. Okay? Okay. Let's try. Let's actually do this. Isabella crossed the room and kissed him, and Ryan kissed her back with everything he had. They stood there in his cramped living room, holding on to each other, and for the first time since this whole thing started, Ryan let himself believe it might actually work. The next few months weren't easy. The HR investigation concluded that Ryan hadn't violated any policies, but the whispers at work continued. People talked. People judged. Ryan learned to ignore it. Isabella started her foundation, the Meridian Initiative, focused on creating opportunities for workers in logistics and distribution. She hired a small team, rented office space in the same neighborhood where Ryan lived, and threw herself into the work with the same intensity she'd brought to being CEO. But the difference was, this work mattered to her. She wasn't chasing quarterly earnings or board approval. She was actually helping people. Ryan stayed at the warehouse. He could have quit, could have tried to find something else, but the work was steady and the money was necessary. Plus, he discovered he liked being there now, liked knowing that Isabella's foundation was working behind the scenes to make things better for people like him. In March, Dale pulled him aside after shift. Corporate's implementing a new program. Better benefits, tuition assistance, actual career development. Apparently some new foundation has been working with them. He looked at Ryan knowingly. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? Ryan smiled. No idea what you're talking about. Right. Well, they're also looking for people to join a worker advisory board. People who actually know what it's like on the floor. I put your name forward. Dale, don't argue. You're good at this. You understand people. And you've got the integrity to do it right. He paused. Plus, it comes with a pay bump. Not huge, but something. Ryan took the position, started attending meetings where he actually had a voice, where his opinions mattered. It was strange at first, sitting in conference rooms and talking about policy changes. But he was good at it. He knew what people needed because he'd needed it himself. Isabella and Ryan didn't move in together. Not right away. They kept their separate places, kept some independence. But they spent most nights together anyway, trading off between his house and her apartment depending on whether Ethan was there. Ethan adjusted to having Isabella around with the easy acceptance of kids who hadn't learned yet to question when good things happened. He started calling her Bella and insisting she attend every school event, every parent-teacher conference, every soccer game he played in his new youth league, the one Isabella had quietly paid for when she found out Ryan couldn't afford the registration fee. I thought we agreed you wouldn't just buy us stuff, Ryan said when he found out. I didn't buy you stuff. I invested in a community sports program that happens to include children from low-income families. It's tax deductible. Isabella, it's my money. I can spend it how I want. She kissed him to cut off his protest. And I want to spend it making sure Ethan gets to play soccer. Deal with it. Ryan dealt with it. In May, Isabella's foundation held its first major event, a fundraiser to expand their programs. Ryan wore a suit he'd bought at a thrift store and felt completely out of place among the donors in their designer clothes. But Isabella kept her hand in his all night, introducing him as her partner without any qualifiers or explanations. Some people were kind. Others were coldly polite. A few were openly disdainful. Ryan heard the whispers, comments about Isabella downgrading, about her new lifestyle, about how sad it was that she'd fallen so far. He was ready to leave, to tell Isabella this wasn't worth it. But then she got up to speak. A year ago, Isabella said into the microphone, I thought I had everything. Success, money, status, all the things we're told matter. And I was miserable. I was living a life that looked perfect from the outside but felt empty on the inside. She paused, her eyes finding Ryan in the crowd. Then I met someone who showed me what actually matters. Not money or power or appearances, but integrity, kindness, the courage to show up every day and do the hard work of being a good person, even when nobody's watching. She looked back at the audience. This foundation exists because I realized how many people work just as hard as I ever did, maybe harder, but never get the recognition or support they deserve. People like my partner, Ryan, who spent years doing everything right and still struggling. That's not acceptable, and we're going to change it. The applause was polite but genuine. Some people looked uncomfortable, but Isabella didn't care. She'd said what she needed to say. After the event, they went back to Ryan's house. Ethan was asleep at Mrs. Chen's. She'd agreed to overnight sitting for the first time ever, charmed by Isabella's genuine gratitude and homemade cookies. They sat on the couch in the quiet house, Isabella still in her evening gown, Ryan in his thrift store suit, both of them exhausted. "That was terrifying," Isabella admitted. "You were amazing." "Did you see their faces? Half of them think I've lost my mind. The other half think you're brave." Isabella leaned against him. "Do you think I'm brave?" "I think you're the bravest person I know." "Even braver than you?" Ryan thought about it, about the past 6 months, about every choice they'd made, every obstacle they'd faced. "We're brave together. That's what matters." In August, Ryan got a promotion. Not huge, team lead managing a small group of workers, but it came with better pay and actual benefits. Enough that he could start saving, enough that he could pay down some debt, enough that when Ethan's birthday came around, Ryan could actually afford a real party instead of just cake at home. They rented space at a park, invited Ethan's whole class plus kids from the neighborhood. Isabella helped Ryan set up while Ethan ran around with his friends, showing off his new cape. This one bought new, not from a thrift store, though Ethan didn't know the difference and wouldn't have cared. "He's happy," Isabella said, watching Ethan play. "Yeah, he is." "You're happy?" Ryan looked at her. "Yeah, I really am." "Me too." Isabella took his hand. "I want to ask you something." "What?" "Move in with me. Officially. Both of you." Ryan's heart jumped. "Your apartment's too small for 3 people. So we'll find something bigger. Together. Somewhere that's ours, not mine or yours. Ours." "Isabella, I know it's a big step. I know there are logistical things to figure out, but I want this. I want us to be a family. An actual, real, official family." Ryan thought about saying no. About all the reasons it was too soon, too complicated, too risky. But then he thought about the past 8 months. About how every time he'd been scared, every time he'd tried to push Isabella away to protect himself, it had been wrong. About how the best things in his life had come from being brave enough to try. "Okay," he said. "Okay? Yeah, let's do it. Let's find a place together." Isabella kissed him right there in the park, in front of all the other parents and kids, and Ryan didn't care who saw. They found a house in September. Nothing fancy, a small 3-bedroom rental in a neighborhood that was slowly gentrifying, with a yard big enough for Ethan to play in and a kitchen that didn't make Ryan feel claustrophobic. It cost more than Ryan could afford on his own, but together they could swing it. Moving day was chaos. Ethan was excited and hyper, running between rooms and claiming the biggest bedroom before Ryan could stop him. Isabella's furniture from her apartment mixed with Ryan's worn pieces in ways that shouldn't have worked, but somehow did. Mrs. Chen brought over a casserole and cried when she hugged Ryan goodbye. "You take care of that boy," she said, meaning Ethan, but maybe meaning Ryan too. "I will." That night, after Ethan was asleep in his new room and the boxes were mostly unpacked, Ryan and Isabella sat on the back porch of their new house, drinking cheap beer because Ryan had insisted on buying it, and Isabella had learned to pick her battles. "This is really happening," Isabella said. "Yeah." "Are you scared?" "Terrified," Ryan admitted, "but in a good way." "Me too." They sat there in comfortable silence, watching fireflies blink in the yard, and Ryan thought about how far they'd both come. Isabella had given up her CEO position, her engagement, her entire carefully constructed life. Ryan had let someone in, had taken a risk on love after swearing he never would again. Neither of them had chosen the easy path. Neither of them had chosen the safe path, but they'd chosen each other, and that had made all the difference. A year later, on a cold December night that felt familiar in all the best ways, Ryan came home from work to find Isabella in the kitchen, making dinner while Ethan did homework at the table. It was such a normal scene, such an ordinary moment, and it was everything. "How was work?" Isabella asked, kissing him hello. "Good. Dale's retiring. They asked if I wanted to interview for his position." Isabella's eyes went wide. "Ryan, that's amazing. Are you going to do it?" "I don't know. It's a lot more responsibility. More hours. I'd have to—" "Dad," Ethan interrupted. "Look what I made!" He held up a drawing. 3 stick figures standing in front of a house, holding hands. 1 tall figure, 1 medium figure, 1 small figure with a cape. Above them, he'd written in careful letters, "My family." Ryan felt his throat close up. He took the drawing, studying every detail. The crooked windows on the house, the oversized sun in the corner, the huge smiles on all 3 figures. "It's perfect, buddy," he managed. "Can we put it on the fridge?" "Absolutely." Later, after Ethan was in bed and the dinner dishes were clean, Ryan stood in front of the fridge looking at that drawing. Isabella came up beside him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "You know what I was thinking about today?" she said. "What?" "That night I showed up at your old house when I was falling apart and you let me in even though you had every reason not to. I was thinking about how different my life would be if you'd turned me away. I almost did. But you didn't. And that changed everything." Ryan turned to face her. "You changed everything. You walked away from your entire life because you wanted something real. That took guts. We both took guts. That's why it worked." Ryan pulled her closer. "I love you. I love you too." They stood there in their kitchen, not fancy, not perfect, but theirs, and Ryan thought about the question Isabella had asked him over a year ago. How did you know you loved her? He told her then that love made everything feel more real, that colors were brighter, food tasted better, even the hard stuff felt worth it. He'd been right, but he'd also been incomplete, because love wasn't just about the feeling. It was about the choice, the daily, deliberate choice to show up, to be honest, to be brave, to keep trying even when things got hard. He and Isabella had chosen each other. Every single day they kept choosing each other. And Ethan, smart kid that he was, had somehow understood before either of them did that they were supposed to be a family. "You gonna take Dale's job?" Isabella asked. Ryan thought about it. More responsibility meant more stress, but it also meant more security. A better future for Ethan, the ability to actually save money, to plan ahead instead of just surviving paycheck to paycheck. "Yeah," he said. "I think I am." "You'll be amazing at it." "How do you know?" "Because you care. About the people, about the work, about doing things right. That's all that matters." Ryan kissed her, soft and slow, grateful for her faith in him even when his own faith faltered. The snow started falling outside, big fat flakes that caught the light from the kitchen window. Ryan thought about that first Christmas, the crooked tree, the empty house, the weight of trying to make it all work alone. He thought about Isabella standing on his porch in the cold, lost and looking for something she couldn't name. They'd both been so broken then, both so scared of what might happen if they actually let themselves hope. But they'd been brave. They'd been honest. They'd chosen the hard path because it was the real path. And here they were. Not perfect, not fixed, but together. A family built on something real instead of something that just looked good from the outside. That was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything. Years from now, when Ethan was grown and Ryan was old, he would look back on this moment, standing in his kitchen with the woman he loved, snow falling outside, his kids drawing on the fridge, and he would remember it as the moment he understood that happiness wasn't about having everything. It was about having the things that mattered, the people who saw you, really saw you, and chose to stay anyway. The quiet moments that didn't look like much but felt like everything. The courage to keep showing up, keep trying, keep choosing love, even when it scared you. Ryan had spent 3 years believing he'd already had his chance at happiness, that Sarah's death had taken that possibility away forever. He'd been wrong. Happiness wasn't a one-time thing. It was a choice you made every day. And standing there in his imperfect kitchen with his imperfect family, Ryan chose happiness. Again and again and again. That was all anyone could do. Choose to be brave. Choose to be honest. Choose to show up for the people who mattered. Everything else would figure itself out.